on the war front in particular, a Russian military airbase was left ablaze after Ukraine has launched a massive drone barrage over Russia recently. The Marinovka Airfield in Volgograd was attacked as Kiev targeted a storage site for fuel, and the bombs over there as well. Up to 28 drones were launched across Russia by Ukraine in the attack. Now, according to Russia, this is they've termed this the largest drone attack against Moscow ever since the war had broken out in February 2022. For months, Ukraine has targeted Russian refineries and airfields with drones in particular, and this attack comes as the Russian troops are suffering losses in Kursk, and Ukraine is pushing forward into the region. Meanwhile, Volodymyr Zelensky has visited Ukraine's Sumy region earlier, where his troops launched a shock incursion into Russia's Kursk itself. Now, of course, he is slated to hold talks with Prime Minister Modi. With us on the broadcast are Major General P.K. Sehgal, defence expert, Surinder Singh Lali, international affairs expert, as well as Mr. Himanshu Bhatt, a senior journalist. I would like to thank all our guests for joining us on the broadcast, waiting rather patiently as well. I'd like to go across to Major General Sehgal first. As I mentioned earlier, we've seen an increase in the hostilities in the backdrop of the Prime Minister's visit. Do you think, considering the fact that the war is continuing to escalate even after 900 days have gone by, do you think the Prime Minister's message can resonate with the Ukrainian leadership?
Absolutely and totally. In fact, the entire world is waiting with a bated breath to see the outcome of this visit. He is the only Prime Minister in the world who has close relations with Putin as well as very close relations with Zelensky. Both trust him, and India has already emerged as a leader of the global south and carries a huge influence and weight behind it. All major countries and minor countries today are bending backwards to woo India. India is turning out to be a Vish Guru and Vish Mitra. He's sending out a very strong message. He's been telling Russia loud and clear, Putin on a number of occasions, that in today's environment, no outcome can come out with a conflict. It has to be through dialogue and diplomacy. As far as Ukraine is concerned, he said, we respect the Charter of the United Nations. Therein, violation of sovereignty and integrity of international borders is something that India cannot agree to. In other words, our position is very categorical and very clear. While we are against any sort of incursion that has been taken by Russia, we are also against what's happening now. If you recall, when this war broke out, I was the only person in the world who made a statement that Putin has committed a huge blunder. Russia cannot win this war, and the West will not allow Ukraine to lose this war. The fact that the war is going on for 2.5 years, now is the time for somebody to make a positive effort to bring about some sort of a peace. And the only country in the world which has the ability to do so is India. If you recall, about 160 years back, Swami Vivekananda had made a statement on the soil of America, saying that he can look far into the future. There will be a time when there will be a huge amount of chaos and trauma in the world. And he said at that point of time, एक देश विश्व गुरु के रूप में उभरेगा, and वो हिंदुस्तान होगा. वास्तव में today, India is the only country in the world who can bring about some sort of a negotiation between the two warring parties. In fact, Putin has also approached Prime Minister Modi to help him to resolve this war. So has Ukrainian President Zelensky been approaching Modi time and again. And it was high time that after the elections in India were over, that the Prime Minister is relatively free, that India makes an absolute and total effort to bring about some sort of a resolution and bring these two players onto the negotiating table, so that the world has been suffering. Today, the entire world is globally connected. Supply chains have been disrupted. There's a huge increase in oil and gas prices. Fertilizer prices have increased. Food prices have increased. And the entire world is suffering because of climate. Global warming is increasing because of huge amount of damage that is being done on a daily basis, both by Ukraine as well as Russia, as far as the environment is concerned. And even the global climate is affecting everybody. And to that extent, it is high time that somebody makes a determined effort to somehow or the other bring about a resolution of this conflict. And personally, I feel India and India alone is in a position to do something meaningful. As far as China is concerned, it has already become a de facto military ally of Russia. And as far as the Western world and NATO is concerned, they are de facto allies of Ukraine. Under the circumstances, there is no other country other than India, and to some extent, President Erdogan of Turkey, who has also made several attempts, but apparently he is not trusted to the extent that people have faith on either side, that is Russia and Ukraine, in Prime Minister Modi. Not only do they trust him, the entire global South today trusts in India and India's Prime Minister. And I'm very certain some sort of a spade work would emerge from this meeting, and the entire world is interested in seeing as to what is the outcome.
Indeed, the entire world is watching. The headlines that PM Modi's visit to Ukraine is making is testament to this. I'd like to take this conversation forward to Mr. Surinder Singh Lali. Sir, do you think India's attempts to balance both Russia and Ukraine and the US, on the other hand, it is testament to India's strategic acumen? What do you make of our diplomatic efforts, our sustained diplomatic efforts? We've not wavered from, our stance ever since the war broke out. Prime Minister Modi has consistently maintained that it is not an era of war. Every single meeting with Vladimir Putin or President Zelensky, he has reiterated that India will continue to, in fact, sustain the efforts as far as maintaining peace is concerned. So, do you think this is testament to India's strategic and diplomatic acumen?
Thank you, Pia. And I think it's a momentous moment for us as Indians. I mean, how often in the history, and the recent history, has the Prime Minister of the largest economy, leader of the world's largest democracy, voice and leader of the global South, virtually walks into a war zone? As for a 7-hour meeting, it's a 20-hour train ride. And not to mention the entire top brass of MEA, the who's and who matter, are with the Prime Minister. So the answer to your question is that if anybody in this world, as if now at this point, has the heft, it is the Republic of India. I think it's a great opportunity for us, although, Turkey and China and even some nations in Africa have tried to negotiate peace, but I don't think there are any points for guessing which side of the fence, especially Turkey and China, are on. So I think we are the only country with our reputation, with our heft, and with our credibility, especially after the recent G20, that we have, the power to convince both the parties, because I think for how long after 900 days can they still fighting? I mean, war is costly, not just for the environment, for the global supply chains, but even for the two parties involved. So I feel that India is the only heft, and not to mention that no leader from China or Turkey has been invited to visit Ukraine. So that ought to give you an idea. And one more point, Pia, which I'm going to park parallel to this, is that even as we speak, Rajnath Singh ji has left for the United States. So there are a certain amount of ruffled feathers in the US, which, America has been nourishing. And if you look at the speech of the American ambassador in India, Mr. Garcietti, you'll get to know that there are a bit miffed on that too. So not only are we operating on this account, Prime Minister Modi's visit into the war zone, but Rajnath Singh is also on American soil. Lack of a better expression, maybe trying to placate the Americans who've been a little unhappy recently. So I feel that this is also nothing else but an extension of our strategic autonomy and non-alignment, but I'm going to call this non-alignment 2.0, because this time India's gotten more muscular. And as a proud Indian, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. And as my previous panelist said, I'm sure something is going to come out, because as you also said, and so did the other panelists, if somebody across the globe has, the heft and the courage of conviction and the credibility, it is us. Thank you, Pia.
Indeed, as you stated, India does have the courage and credibility. And just before I go across to Mr. Himanshu Bhatt, who's been waiting very patiently, I have something to show to my viewers on my screen over here. These are the visuals of Prime Minister Modi disembarking from the Rail Force One. I request the crew upstairs to showcase it to our viewers. Right here, he's taken this 20-hour-long journey. Yes, right there are the visuals on the screen. Prime Minister Modi arriving in Kyiv. This is the moment he touched down in Kyiv after the 20-hour-long rail ride. This is, of course, the Rail Force One, which is popularly known as a high-end hotel on wheels, a rather luxurious train which has been used as a mode of transport by President Joe Biden as well as French President Emmanuel Macron in the past as well. So now, of course, PM Modi is in Kyiv. He's arrived at his hotel already. He's met with the diaspora as well. And speaking of the diaspora, Mr. Himanshu Bhatt, we've seen a tradition of Prime Minister Modi consistently making sure that the first thing he does after reaching any particular city in foreign land is greet the Indian community over there that is waiting to catch a glimpse of him at the hotel. We've seen this in Moscow as well. We've seen this in France earlier. We've seen this in Sydney, in Papua New Guinea, in Hiroshima, in Japan last year as well. So do you think this has also bolstered the confidence of the diaspora community, and is the message that the Indian administration is there with them in any point of time, especially in times of need? We've seen how India helped evacuate all those students who were stuck when the war broke out first. So do you think these outreach, the diaspora outreach tradition by the Prime Minister sends this message that no Indian will be left behind?
Yes, definitely. See, it's a changed India. One needs to understand. See, there was a time when our foreign policy used to be with the foreigners, but not with the Indians. Now, wherever we go, whether it is Madison Square Garden, whether it is Sydney Operas, or whether it's Kyiv, or whether it is Warsaw, where there are just 20,000 Indians. But still, the Prime Minister makes it a point to meet them. The reason for that is giving a worldwide message, a very clear message, that for us, India first, Indians first. And that needs to be understood by the world. Now, let me tell you something about real politics. Today, as he reached there in Kyiv, there is a statement from Russian side. And what is the statement? The statement is, we respect Modi's visit to Kyiv. That says a lot of things. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm going to talk about real politics and tell you, we are not going to be negotiators. No, sir. We are the facilitators. We'll bring both the Vladimirs, pulling them by ear, come and sit on the table and talk. It's your job to sort out the matters which you have started. We are not the ones. What we are bothered about is our Russian weapons have Ukrainian engines. And that needs to be understood. You have to play the game of real politics at some time. And today's India, 2024's India, is not the one which was there in 2010 or 2004. We are going to go our way. So, talking of all these things, yes, we are Vishwabandhus, Vishwamitras, rather I would say, friends. And so, we get along well with all. When we can say Putin that we don't like children being killed, we also say to Volodymyr Zelensky that, buddy, because of your egos, what's happening is the entire supply chain of the global south is broken. And people are suffering from a lot of things. And that's the reason that Modi ji virtually talked to global south, 123 nations before going there. So there are a lot of things, a lot of dots that needs to be connected. And when he says, even in Warsaw, just before going to Kyiv, this is not the era of war, but he knows The war is 900 days old. And this counter-offensive, why is it going on right now? The reason is when you go on a negotiating table, everybody needs something to give and take.
Indeed,
And I'm not the one who will believe that Russians were caught off guard and these people went in. Sorry, sir. Russians are far too smarter than that. They know that there is a counter-offensive coming in Kursk. Why is it that the Russian forces were not there? It was a walk-in and it was not a battle. So one needs to understand these things. And people don't seem to know, they are moved by India this, India that, why it is there. But understand the real politic of the whole thing, what's been happening. And that is what I'm looking at. India plays a crucial role of a facilitator. And mind you, I'll stop with that. Donald Trump, the US presidential candidate, has already said if he comes to power, he will stop supply to Ukraine. So simply, the war will stop. He says, I will not let this war go on. When that is the case, you need some facilitator to initiate the process. And that is what Bharat will do. Now, I will not say even India, Bharat will. And that is what we are working towards Vishwabandhutva. That is my viewpoint. Yes.
Indeed, sir, as you've aptly put it, it is, imperative to at least initiate the process in order to make sure that a consensus is reached and that peace is achieved. But we have seen in the past that Russia has been excluded as well from these conversations. China as well. China is, of course, trying to meddle as usual, needle as usual. Even as PM Modi is in Kiev, their Prime Minister is in Belarus and will be visiting Russia as well. So what do you think India can do in order to at least make sure that the first step is achieved of bringing all the parties to the dialogue table and ensuring that at least, conversation commences?
I'm very hopeful. The way Indian MEA, Ministry of External Affairs, has, downplayed this entire event. If you see it, you will understand that they are expecting something very, very big. But they are not saying till it is done. And Modi's visit last month to Russia, and then to Austria. Austria is a European Union member, but not a NATO country. Understand that. And then he is going to Poland, and then to Ukraine. Now, it has so many significant, so many dots there, which you need to connect in geopolitical terms. And when you look at the real politics in today's terms, why is it that after 900 days, Ukraine, starts a counter-offensive? Why is it that US Congress has to say, something, what is the sanction? What is the sanction? $60 billion. And we have somebody from the military, he'll tell you how much the 60 billion is. And mind you, Pia, compare it with the Indian defense budget. After all the salaries and pensions, we barely spend 50 billions even today. What does it show? It's the military-industrial complex of USA that is benefiting. And then now they want to reconstruct Ukraine. So you will make money from the military-industrial complex first, and then to reconstruct Ukraine. And on one side, one third of Ukraine has a Russian-speaking population, Crimea and other places. Now, Russia considers it a right that these are my people. It is their right. Fine, no problems about it. That's their claim. But then when Russians see the NATO's coming in front of their house, see, this is what US has been playing across the world. When you connect the dots, you will understand that. On one side, they start a Bangladesh. That is to harass India. On the other side, they start an Israel-Hamas conflict. What is it happening? Who is supplying Israel? To Israel, they supply 35 billion. Arms, not money. See, what we are talking about is, they say we are giving this much of aid. But is it given in cash? No, sir. That's given to the military industrial complex that makes the arms and gives it to them. So what are they doing? They are running their wartime economy fine by making everybody fight in the world. And that's what has been happening. And someone has to bring an end to that. And that can be done only when you have a strong mind, like Narendra Modi. So many people here in India were shouting, why should he take up this train ride? It is very risky and this and that and all. But you know something? I will not be surprised if I find Narendra Modi carrying a personal message of Vladimir Putin to Vladimir Zelensky. I will not be surprised.
That's a very interesting point you've raised, personal message, and of course Prime Minister Modi being the one to carry that forward. Of course, we will keep an eye out on what exactly will the conversation be, but you've pointed out something very interesting, especially with regards to the larger picture, that is the US military industrial complex. This is something that one of their former presidents, in fact, who was the supreme commander of the Allied forces during the Second World War, Dwight Eisenhower, he is the one who had coined this term and stated that the US continues perpetuating war in order to pump out more money to make sure that the manufacturing facilities continue to operate. Now, I'd like to go back across to Major General Sehgal, who's also been listening rather patiently. Sir, you know, the US is minting money. They are pumping a lot of money into this, but they're minting a lot as well. The war, meanwhile, is being fought in Europe, in Central Europe in particular, that is becoming more destabilized day by day. Yet the US is the one who continues to benefit in all of this, even as we see the global trade routes also suffering, the trade lines, economic lines also suffering. So, do you think this is, of course, a bet that US had hedged back in 2022 in order to perpetuate its hegemony in the global order? And do you think that it has paid them dividends? And is it time in order to make sure that this war and the senseless fighting stops?
Whether it was in Syria, whether it was in Lebanon, whether it was in Iraq or Afghanistan or India, Pakistan, was America's military industrial complex has been involved. They've been making sure that conflicts take place around the world because they are the biggest gainers. In fact, if you notice, their share values have jumped up more than 1,000%, and they do not want wars to come to an end. If you notice, even the Hamas and Israel war would have come to an end long time back had they not been giving tons and tons of money and weapons to Israel. Israel would not have had the capacity to carry on war for so many days, for almost about 9 months, but for the American assistance. And the military industrial complex is the most influential. They can even influence the outcome of the presidential election there. And no president, whether it is Biden or whether it is future Trump or Kamala Harris, can overlook and ignore the influence of the military industrial complex. While Trump categorically says that he'll bring an end to the war, I'm not too sure whether he'll succeed in doing so. Because once again, as I said, the military industrial complex is far too powerful. And they have the capacity to even change the prime ministers and the presidents. The interference that has taken place in our neighborhood in Bangladesh is again masterminded by the Americans with a result to create conditions of instability around us. And they've succeeded to that extent. What is happening in Pakistan, double games are being played. What's happening in Europe, once again, are double standards. If you notice, there is not only the eastward expansion of NATO, but Ukraine wanting to become a member of the NATO would have meant that doubling the border between NATO and Russia and the erstwhile Soviet Union. Unfortunately, they laid a trap for Putin, and Putin's Russia got involved in that trap. With the Kursk incursion now by the Ukrainians, the image and the standing and the credibility of Putin in Russia has taken a huge beating. A lot of people today in particularly those who matter, are beginning to question whether Putin has been right in carrying out the war in the manner that he's been carrying out. They're wondering what's happening, and they've almost lost about 25 warships. They've lost a submarine. They've lost their naval bases in Crimea. They've lost a lot of air bases in Russia. Even Moscow and 4 cities around have been attacked. Large-scale capture of the territory in Kursk. Lot of infrastructure of Russia is being destroyed by a country which was considered a military, virtually nincompoop as far as Russia was concerned when the war started. And today, Ukraine is doing a phenomenal amount of damage to Russia. They're very clearly indicating to Russia that in every game, there are 2 partners and there are 2 players. And if one player crosses all limits, the other player also will do something similar. And they've been able to demonstrate that very effectively. Ukraine is wanting to manufacture 1 million drones a year, and they're launching more than almost couple of hundred drones a day. So this has become a very, very asymmetric war where the beneficiary is Ukraine in a major way. And Ukraine is demonstrating to Russia its capability and its capacity to carry on the war till times. Even if Trump withdraws the support to Ukraine, the European Union considers Russian victory in Ukraine as an absolute emerging threat, existential threat to Europe. So Europe would bend backwards to make sure that they continue to support Ukraine to the extent that is feasible. And their economies expenditure was 0.7 to 0.8% on defense. Almost all NATO countries are not spending close to 2% of the GDP on this. As the previous panelist said, if you take away the salary and the pension bill, India's defense budget of this year is less than the last year's RE stage. And what is left for modernization of the armed forces is only very marginal. Under the circumstances, the only person in the world who today has a heft, who has the image, who has the credibility, who has emerged as the leader of the global south, also a leader of the countries in Latin America and Africa, etc., is Prime Minister Modi. And I would not be surprised if he's carrying a letter from Putin, because Putin is beginning to realize that this war is equally harmful to Russia as well as to Ukraine. And both countries are suffering enormously. Not only they're suffering, the entire world has started to suffer. And Russia stands isolated. There's a huge amount of sanctions that are against Russia. And Russia realizes Russia doesn't trust China. The biggest threat to Russian existentialism in the future is from China. China has categorically stated that by 2049, they will retake Vladivostok, which is the only water base or port of Russia, because they've made huge encroachments into Siberia. And the Russians can do nothing about it because they've got a population of about 130 million versus about 50 million on the other side. And the Chinese are the biggest beneficiaries, much to the dislike of Russians. Unfortunately for China, India continued to woo Russia as well as America. We are only doing something that is in India's interest. India has become a global player, it's become an emerging player, and we only do what is in India's interest.
Indeed, and I'd like to draw attention to something that the Prime Minister has just tweeted out. He's tweeted out a couple of pictures of his meeting with the Indian diaspora. I have it open on my system over here. He stated and appreciated the warm welcome that has been accorded to him in Kiev. Here you can see members of the diaspora lining up. This is at his hotel, the Hyatt Regency. Of course, you can see the enthusiastic smiles on the face, some at the back just waiting to catch one glimpse of the Prime Minister, elated with his visit as well. He's tweeted out a set of more pictures. There are some Ukrainians also who've come to greet him over there. Several people are clicking photos, and this is a very interesting picture on your screens, viewers. You can see here medical students who are greeting the Prime Minister. Now, there are about 25,000 odd so strong diaspora in Ukraine. Out of this, about 18,000 is that of medical students who've gone to pursue their degrees, and there higher education in Ukraine itself. Now, it is these students that were stranded back in 2022 when the war had broken out, and of course India had put in all effort and left no stone unturned to ensure their safe return back home. Here of course you can see the medical students all smiles as they speak with the Prime Minister. Another very interesting image is over here. You can see PM Modi is being greeted by Ukrainian people over there, some diaspora members of the Indian community as well, but a lot of Ukrainians over there are also greeting the Prime Minister. India, of course, it's soft power, it's a cultural outreach in Ukraine, leaving an imprint, leaving its footprint. Several movies from Indian film industries are shot there as well. Here of course you can see the people-to-people connect between India and Ukraine on your screens. In fact, some of the members of our diaspora have also spoken out and expressed their enthusiasm as far as the Prime Minister's visit is concerned. Let's quickly listen into them as well. Do we have the sound bites? It seems that the crew is finding some difficulty finding the sound bites. Meanwhile, I'd like to go across to Mr. Surinder Singh Lali. I've just shown our viewers a set of images, of course, showcasing how the diaspora community as well as those who are native Ukrainians are all gathered to greet PM Modi at his hotel as soon as he arrived. Do you think this reflects Prime Minister Modi's popularity across the globe?
Not only does it reflect the charisma that the Prime Minister has been able to, generate through his, foreign trips, and not just in the diaspora, but even across global leaders. I mean, he's known for his japis. But having said that, I've been part of the diaspora. I've lived in the United States for a long time and also in Europe. And I must tell you, of course, at the risk of patting my own back, we are some of the best immigrants any country can get. I mean, you've seen the way things are in Scandinavia. You see the things are in France. You see the things are in England. And yet Indians are some of the most law-abiding people. And I often used to say in the US that an average Indian, when he lands in the United States, legal or illegal, he is productive to the society in the first 15 days of his landing because they are hardworking people. They've gone there for a certain reason, and they simply want to prosper and help their children with amenities and luxuries that they couldn't have. So with due respect, our diaspora is equally important because they are now, look at the way Indians are in the American Congress and congressmen. So they also influence the policymakers because the diaspora in India, the Indian diaspora definitely is one of the most educated. So obviously now that they're getting financially affluent, and in Western economy, there is no point for guessing that if you are part of the fundraisers, you can influence economies. And I was part of the Democratic fundraiser of the India caucus in New York City. So where, it was $1,000 a plate. And for $1,000, you could rub shoulders with, Bill and Hillary Clinton. And I personally, served food to them. So having said that, so our diaspora is the unknown soldier behind the scene, which is creating the base for the likes of the Prime Minister and our nimble and deft foreign minister to, be the next Vishwa Guru. So they're also equally important. And I have two more things to say from, Himanshi. He said in great detail that a lot of what's going on, I think it is Cold War 2.0, I think, has started. And America wants us to be an ally and not a strategic partner. And number two is, General Saab said, that there'll never be a coup in America. You know why? Because they don't have an American embassy there. So hence no CIA and hence no dirty tricks department. So yeah, I mean, they're all, it's politics and America knows how to divide and rule. The only thing between an American and a Talibani is that unfortunately an American doesn't come with an AK-47 loaded. He comes with big, policies and money bags to influence countries where they use IMFs think tanks and now recently the likes of George Soros to influence and meddle into the internal affairs of countries. It's just that, their crimes are more white collar, lack of a better expression. So hence they do it with style and with their armored cars and their Armani suits.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.